What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Ball podcast. I am your host, Trill Bro Dude, and earlier today I recorded this episode with Jim Adair. We kind of knew what was going to happen here. The Sixers were going to face the Raptors in the first round, which we got confirmation for today. We had a feeling that it was going to shake out this way, so we kind of prepared for that in this episode when we did record it. And I did say at the time, I felt like this is the preferable path. You'll hear why later. I'm totally fine with this outcome. Ultimately, I think if the Sixers are going to make a run, they need to overcome some teams that they've struggled against in the past. But after today's game, even though they won yesterday, they won today, the vibes for the team just feel off. And it's kind of felt this way for a few weeks now, where it doesn't seem like Doc Rivers is comfortable in his job. He got snippy with Derek Bodner today in the press conference, which was totally out of line by Doc and ridiculous because I thought that Bodner's question was totally fine. And we all know Bodner's very good at his job and he takes it very seriously, and thought his question was legitimate. And Doc ultimately didn't like the fact that he was questioning a decision that he made regarding Deandre Jordan and Paul Reed and all of that stuff that we talk about every single episode on this podcast. And it does feel as though between that element of it and the Matisse Thybulle element of the vaccination status, that things are a bit off right now. And I am a little bit concerned because I think that generally speaking, going into the playoffs, you want positive vibes all around. You want to win some games, make some statements right before the playoffs, and you want to be all together. You want to have each other's back. And with the history that this team has, and James Harden has, and pretty much everyone but Tyrese Maxey from a mentality standpoint has, you don't want guys quitting on each other or quitting on the coach, especially if they face adversity here in this first round. I am not feeling great about going into this. The Sixers should win this series, but as I've stated before, it's possible that Toronto takes them to 7. It's possible Toronto just wins the series. I'm going to do later in the week, I'm doing a breakdown episode in a few days with the guys from the Pound the Rock podcast, as I've mentioned a few times. And they cover the NBA at large, but they're also Raptors guys. They're from Toronto. And it feels like everything kind of has been going good for them, and things have not been going great for us here. Ultimately, the Sixers will have to win some tough series. Ultimately, they're going to have to overcome some of their past playoff demons. I don't know if Doc Rivers is the coach to do that. I think that his history suggests he's not. He's not the guy to put this team over the top or help them get past those demons. But this is what the situation is. The Sixers should win. As I said before, they have more talent. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the week. On this episode, we covered a lot of different stuff. We covered Joel Embiid winning the scoring title. We covered just kind of how we feel about the team in general, some things that could go well in the playoffs, some things that could not go well in the playoffs. So this was kind of a regular season summary / playoff preview. So enjoy this episode. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube, because this Friday and possibly on Saturday for the first Sixers game, I'm going to be live streaming during those games. We're doing the NBA is Drunk, where I get drunk and hang out with people and talk during the games that are playing. We're going to be talking during the last play-in games, which is going to be the 8, not, or I don't even know who's going to play, whatever. The second play-in games for the Eastern and Western Conference. On Friday night, we will be doing that. And then the Sixers, they just announced that they're playing Saturday night for the first game against the Raptors. So if I can hold my mentality together and not lose my mind for that game, I'll be live streaming for that as well. So subscribe to the YouTube if you have not already. Like this video, please. Also, if you're listening on Apple, please rate us. If you're listening on Spotify, please rate us. Please share it. We're hoping that we keep the momentum going into the playoffs and we can restore some of the positive vibes, because we certainly need it right now. We certainly need it. So I will talk to you a little bit later in the week. You can, do all the other stuff that you want to do. Support us in the description. You want to donate on the square, do whatever. Anything you can do to support us, I really, really appreciate it. And another Sixers playoff run. It's my favorite time of year. Let's get it, baby. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the BBall Podcast. I am your host, Trill Bro Dude, and today I'm excited to have back onto the podcast for the second time Jim Adair, formerly of Liberty Ballers, and the Step Over podcast. Last time you were on, I called it the Step Back. Now we have James Harden. It's appropriate. But
yeah, true. If it was still going on, we would have to rename it. Yeah.
It's true. It still would be relevant, though, because of the recent beef with Thybulle and everything. I mean, you know, the Step Over will live in infamy. But we're here today to talk about the Sixers, who they just keep Sixersing. I don't really know how else to describe it. You know, they've had some close losses recently, some close wins. We've been talking a lot about kind of where they're standing going into the playoffs. We're recording this before the last day of the regular season, so while you're listening, the results will already be out. But I just want to talk a little bit up top about how you feel about the team going into the playoffs and which path you would prefer, just of the two paths that the Sixers could have. So right now, the Sixers basically, it all hinges on the Bucks and Celtics, what's happens to them today. They're most likely to end up in the 4 seed, play the Raptors, and then play the Heat in the second round. Mm-hmm. Or they could go in the other direction, and if they win and the Celtics lose, then they move up into the 3 seed. And from there, they would play the Chicago Bulls, which everyone is viewing as a first-round bye, basically. And then you get the Nets or the Bucks in the second round. So how do you feel just about, like, which route would you prefer?
I used to say this. We had this discussion back when Max and I did the Step Over, and every time we got to the playoffs, my point of view was attempting to be, if you think you're a serious championship contender, which you can go back and forth on, but like that's the idea, right? Then you shouldn't really fear anybody, and you shouldn't really, you know, you can have a preferred path, but you shouldn't be bummed if they get one or the other. But that's if you don't have your only real good wing defender staying in a different country than the rest of your team for half of the series. Yes. So I would say, I mean, as much as, like, you know, no matter what, if you want to win the championship, whatever this year, the baseline bottom line goal is to get out of the second round, right? And if you think this team should be good enough or could be good enough to actually compete for a championship, so make the finals, then you're going to have to face one of those Bucks Nets anyway. So why not try to slay 2 dragons at once and get them in the second? And also that way too, I mean, if I was Doc, I'd want him in the second, because if they lose in the second round again, he's like, well, it was the Bucks and the Nets. What do you expect me to do? You know? But yeah, I mean, I think I don't want, no matter how much it would actually impact wins or losses, and they do have home court, but no matter how much, like, in reality, I don't want them to have to lose a series because of a decision that one man made, essentially. If you go in and you lose the games, and you lose the games, fine. But if you lose the games because somebody is literally across an international border from the rest of your squad, then I think that's more of an issue with me, because the thought being, it's a lot easier to say, well, if the guy was just fucking there, then they could have done it.
Right.
You know, it's easier to say that than, like, well, if he played well, if he did this, like, if he was just there. Yeah. So I don't want to go into that. It looks like that's the most likely outcome. And I'm going to sound real stupid when people hear this if it's not what the outcome is. But it's going to stress people out. Also, I don't want to hear the fucking discourse around it anymore already. I don't want to talk about it for a full week and a half. So yeah, I don't want that path at all.
So the advantages of getting Chicago in the first round. So if the Sixers win today and the Celtics lose, then the advantages of that is that you, like I said, people are viewing it as a first round bye. I mean, I think the Sixers or whoever plays them is going to win in 4 or 5 at the most. I think that ultimately that's the easiest first round matchup of any team in the Eastern Conference, except for maybe whoever gets the 8 seed. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, what you're saying is definitely true. But my whole argument for going the other way and getting the Raptors Heat route is that if you can't beat the Raptors in the first round, you're not contenders. You're not. Because the Raptors aren't contenders.
And if you can't beat Heat in the second either, to be honest with you.
No, I don't think either of those teams are legit contenders to win the NBA Finals. Right. Now, could they make a run and with some injury luck, make it to the finals, or one of them could make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. It just basically depends on how that Sixers-Raptors series goes.
Yeah.
But my ultimate point on this whole thing is the Thybulle thing hurts a little bit. I do wonder, and I think that the Raptors exposed the Sixers' perimeter defense for sure the other night, especially without Matisse Thybulle in the game. But also, he played in the other games, and they were all close as well. So who's to say whether Thybulle playing those minutes or Danny Green or one of the other wings playing those minutes would be that big of a difference if you consider both ends of the court. Defensively, obviously, Thybulle's going to help you a lot. Offensively, down the stretch of the last game that he played in, the Sixers offense was very bad, and he was a contributor to that. Now, a larger part of it is probably James Harden just not playing well and making any shots in either of those games. But my whole thing with going the Raptors Heat route is I think the other end of the spectrum, the bracket that has the Celtics, the Nets, and the Bucks in it currently, just let those teams kill each other. Because those teams to me are like, if the Celtics get back Robert Williams in the second round, they could potentially knock off the Bucks. They could potentially knock off the Nets. And then I think that easily, I could see any of those three teams coming out outside of that part of the bracket. And putting yourself in a second round series with the Bucks leads to that potential that you talked about with like Doc Rivers, where you said, like, I don't want to leave it in the hands of one person. Well, we are leaving it in the hands of Doc Rivers. Ultimately, he's the one who gets to choose. And a comment that he made recently that really, because he has listened to us and started to try some other options at backup center. Played Paul Reed the last two games. You know, there were some mixed results, but Paul's young and he hasn't gotten a lot of run, and you would expect this, which is why we wanted to do it earlier. But one of the things that really stood out in my mind that he said was, when we're going up against a team that has a big, like a traditional big, we're going to play DeAndre. And the Bucks and the Nets both play more traditional bigs, generally speaking, than the Raptors and the Heat. And I would like to see, and not that I think that the difference between Paul Reed and DeAndre Jordan is going to be the end of the world if James Harden is not James Harden in the playoffs.
True.
But some of these series, we know with the Sixers history, come down to these really thin margins. And I think going the Raptors Heat route is like a way to like get that confidence with this team, gain some more chemistry. And by the time you get to the Eastern Conference Finals, whoever comes out of that other side of the bracket, who knows, with some injury luck, like maybe you're sitting pretty by the Eastern Conference Finals and you have a legit shot to make the finals. So that's my pitch for going with the other route. Because if they can't beat the Raptors in the first round, they ain't fucking beating the Bucks, and they're not beating the Celtics or the Nets.
That's true. Going back to Doc's comment that I wanted to touch on, that annoyed me in a couple different ways. One, I understand that you are playing with the hand that you have, sure. And I understand that the history of this team is that if you could clone Joel, even like cut his skill in half and have him back himself up, we win every series he's ever sat out in, basically.
I mean, basically, Andre Drummond can't shoot.
Right. So,
that was the massive difference.
So I understand to a certain extent the idea that you're playing you're defensively picking who your backup center is, right? Based on who the other guy has. But that's just a flaw in the contract of the team too, right? Like the other team doesn't have to, they're not picking their backup center based on your guy. Why? Like the fact that you have to do that is a flaw in team construction, which has always been a flaw in team construction. Second thing, and I understand too that rotations and experience and people relying on each other and playing together matters too. But I do not really understand, and maybe I'm an idiot. Well, I am an idiot, but maybe in this specific case, I'm being an idiot. Why it has to be one or the other, right? Why can't you roll out DeAndre, and when you go, oh shit, he sucks ass, put Paul Reed in? You know, why can't you have them split that time essentially and give different looks that the other team now has to react to a little bit? I don't react shit to DeAndre, but you know, why are you immediately like, you know, hitching your wagon to one guy and just writing him out? And that's Doc's issue, right? That he makes all the adjustments way too late. And that's going to be the case again. But coming out already, I say that. Why not just say, like, you know, we're going to feel it out as the game goes on. If things aren't working out, we'll switch it up. Even if it's a lie, just say that, man. You have no problem lying all the time. What's it matter now?
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
totally agree. And I think that's something that was probably the one thing that he did right in the Hawks series
Yeah.
was that like he threw Shake Milton into the one game and was just like, all right, well, no one can create their own shot right now.
Yep.
No one can do anything in the half court offensively. Let's give Shake a shot. It
Yep.
worked out. Game 6. Let's throw Maxey in there. Let's see if that works. I think the feel element of it, that was probably the best thing that he did coaching wise. Now, everything else, as mentioned, is all the same stubbornness that we have seen from Doc, sticking with Dwight, even though those lineups were absolutely terrible.
Yep.
Basically constantly shooting yourself in the foot because you once again make all the adjustments way too late. You're not and I think that this is another example of him, when we got Harden, as you said, part of this is on Daryl Morey for not giving him an option at backup center that is reliable. Like, I know you were getting Harden at the deadline and that was your main focus and that was the only thing that mattered and blah, blah, blah. But like Daniel Tice got traded for nothing. Like, how great would you feel right now if the Sixers had Daniel Tice as the backup center?
And now I'll say this too, knowing full well that like I'd probably feel differently if he was here, but like, are we sure that DeAndre is better than Willie Cauley-Stein? Probably not.
No.
Because at least see, here's the thing, right? So Willie Cauley-Stein or someone like him would give you something like we crave in Paul Reed, which is just a bit of energy and athleticism. And even if they make bozo decisions or foul a bunch or whatever, they're doing something rather than just being cement shoes somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, and as Sixers Beat pointed out, as a few people have pointed out, DeAndre Jordan is the worst rim protector in the NBA this season based on his time with the Sixers.
Yeah.
He's giving up 75%, I believe, at the rim. That's everyone is Giannis when DeAndre Jordan is protecting the rim.
And that's completely fine if it's not DeAndre Jordan. If it's a stretch five who sits in the corner, if it's somebody who's more of a small ball five who's rotating and doing switching and stuff like that. But that's not who he is. So, if you had Mike Muscala and he was letting him 75% shots at the rim, you let that go because he's doing other stuff that you need. DeAndre doesn't do shit.
All he does is rebound, which is what Paul Reed is arguably better at.
Yeah.
And then like Bassey, Reed, whoever. Like, honestly, I'm to the point with DeAndre where like I think that I could hear an argument for in certain matchups playing Paul Millsap over him because of the stuff that you talked about. Like, Millsap at least will have the passing savvy. He at least will have the ability to stretch the floor sometimes. Like there's at least in theory something there. There's nothing left with DeAndre Jordan besides like he doesn't protect the rim. He's horrible in space. Defensively, he's getting crushed. Offensively, the only thing he brings is the same thing that every other big would bring in that situation.
Yeah.
And now we've got to the point where I think with this backup center thing that a large majority of it is, all the stuff that I've been talking about for weeks. But on top of that, if James Harden is James Harden, it probably doesn't matter as much because I think that Harden's inability, because he has, like offensively, he can't hit a fucking shot. And like right now, it might not be hurting them that much because the offense with Embiid and him on the court is like, the numbers break my brain. Like they're so fucking good. It's crazy. Like 125 offensive rating. But Harden has his defensive struggles, and to have a center that would help cover up some of those issues would definitely help.
Yeah.
But on top of that, if he was able to carry the offense in a way that he did when he was in Houston and the way that, even if some of the numbers look good when it's just Harden on the court, I think a large result of that is because of the fact that the Sixers defense is so bad that we're just giving up. There's so many possessions when Embiid is off the court that the other team's getting easy shots. It's like, our offensive rating might be 118, but it's because the other team is running down our throats.
Yeah.
And then also just creating so many more offensive possessions, and that might inflate the offensive rating a little bit. And the eye test tells you Harden isn't the same. So if Harden can get back to I just keep thinking about the first 5 games and when the 2 times that he's had rest this season, which it's possible they rest him today. I think they'll probably play him just because he'll have a week off after this. But I think that the Sixers ultimately what their fate relies on is James Harden being the James Harden when he first got here is what takes this team from a first, second round out to a potential finals winner. So he is the swing piece with everything, because I think that there are depth issues. I think there is the backup center issue. I think there's a ton of matchup issues that they will have. And all of that can be covered up by James Harden being James Harden.
Yeah. And even if, that's the ideal, right? That's the reason you brought him in here, where, and part of me is trying to, be more calm about it. And I'm, very chill about it, but not internally stressed, because for the last 4 years, right? Every year when it comes to this time, it's like, okay, regular season's over. None of that matters anymore. Playoff stuff. So if he sucks ass right now, and if he just is terrible or whatever, and then the playoffs hit and he starts playing well, it's like, okay, there you go. Maybe he is saving some energy for the playoffs. That's kind of what I'm hoping, and hoping against hope, that this recent real, like, hardcore surge of just terrible perimeter defense recently, like worse than usual, just like not even bothering chasing guys out, just like missing rotations. It's just pure energy saving.
Right.
That's possible, whether it's on purpose or not. And I hope there's some of that, and you'll see that turned up. And, rotations tighten up, and, people get smarter and play harder in the playoffs and stuff. But if there's a little bit of that, great. There's also the part where, even if he doesn't become, world beater James Harden again, but he's like above where he's at now, maybe halfway between here and there, what he can do to elevate the game of Maxey and Tobias and Danny Green, who's on the floor, and Matisse, if he's in the right country, that also does wonders. Like, I'm not, trying to say like, oh, we don't need prime James Harden. We obviously do, but it's not like that's all he can also offer. And if he's lacking here, but he can up things elsewhere, that can cover up your deficiencies against your lesser early round opponents, hopefully. Probably not later on. Probably not against Milwaukee or the Nets.
Or Phoenix, if you get to the finals. Yeah.
I mean, worry about that way later. But if you can get to that point when playing at 80% of high energy and talent-wise, and then you can ramp up, the issue is the then you can ramp up thing a realistic thing, or is that just fairy tale, But that's the thing you can worry about when you get there. If you can get through the first round with Harden playing maybe 20% better than he is right now, then that's great. And then you need him to take another 20% bump the next round and go from there. But, if you can get him a week off for the play-ins, and then he comes back and he's not going super, super nuts, but the team is winning, that's fine. I wouldn't be too worried. As long as the team's winning, I'm not worried. When it comes to the point where he has to step it up, or the team loses the games more often than they win them, then that becomes more of a concern. But I'm not super, super stressed out about his level of physicality or anything right now, until it starts causing losses in the playoffs at this point, really.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that just beyond the eye test of like everything that we've talked about with Harden, once again, the numbers are good, but like his free throw rate breaks my brain. It's so high. That's not going to happen in the playoffs. The one thing that I don't even want to say concerned with is like, I think that historically speaking, it's gone the other way for James Harden. Yeah. Now, maybe not early rounds in the playoffs. Like, I think early rounds, like, he's had some really good success. It's actually similar to Joel Embiid in terms of, like, in the early rounds, he can be a world beater against the old Utahs and the Minnesota Timberwolves and the teams that he tended to beat up on when he was in Houston. And I do worry because the Sixers, in all likelihood, if they're trying to make a run at the NBA Finals, my predictable path for them would be, at this point, Raptors, Heat, Bucks, defense. Yep. And I do wonder against playoff defenses if he's not going to be able to ramp up, like you said, for more than a few games, because we've seen him in stretches and like, I just want to talk a little bit about the 18-19 parallels, because this is something that I was
just going to bring that up as well. Yeah,
I was going to say, because this reminds me so much of the 18-19 season. It's fucking insane, because in the 18-19 season, we were having these same conversations before, and I do think there's a little bit of revisionist history when it comes to that season, because people only remember, well, they only lost on the Kawhi shot, right? And it's like, no, going into the playoffs, we were like, Jimmy hasn't looked the same. The shot isn't falling. Tobias started off hot with the team, but was not looking good going into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
We always had our question marks about Ben Simmons in the playoffs. There was a lot of tension. There was a lot of stuff going on in that team. And
also, they clawed their way back in that series, which is great work on their part. But that's a series they did lose and probably should have lost the way they've been playing. And also, we love to talk about the Kawhi shot, but if Kawhi misses that shot, they're losing in overtime. There was no way they were pulling that game out in overtime.
Or if they win, who knows if they beat the Bucks in the next round. Like, I think it's just everyone just assumes that would have been the case. But it's something that we talked about pre-podcast, which is like, first off, the Raptors missed like every open shot in that series. I don't know if you remember that, but they missed a ton of open threes that they normally would not miss until Serge Ibaka became Kevin Durant in Game 7.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of like, there were certain games where the Sixers dominated and there were certain games where the Raptors dominated and some were toss-ups and whatever. But it did feel like the Sixers, because of Joel Embiid's insane defense in that series, because Jimmy Butler carried for like 2 or 3 games, they were a little bit lucky to even be in that Game 7 in the first place. And I think that you could easily argue, well, maybe if Embiid doesn't get sick in that series or he isn't banged up or whatever, like it could have gone the other way. Totally fine. Totally true. But the assumption that that team was like firing on all cylinders going into the playoffs is actually completely false. And it was like we stumbled down the stretch. We didn't have Embiid for a chunk of it, and we were all panicked about his health. Like, there was a lot of question marks going into the playoffs. Woj was like, Brett Brown's gone if they don't make a run. The only thing that saved his job was that he arguably outcoached Nick Nurse in that series, and the Sixers ended up losing anyway. But I had a parallel tweet the other day where I said they trade for the all-star player in season, Jimmy Butler, James Harden, very similar. Obviously, Jimmy got a lot more time with the team. He didn't have the health question marks that Harden did that season. The coach is on the hot seat rumors as the playoffs are about to start. Doc, all these rumors coming out about Doc to the Lakers, and he's out of here.
Oh no!
Oh no! Please don't steal him. Please, please no.
Please don't trade us a future pick for Doc Rivers.
It would just be the perfect Laker. Like we talked about this last episode, but it's like the team that never learns from their mistakes because they don't have to learn from their mistakes.
Nope.
Like they have like. We can fuck up for a decade and it doesn't matter because Donovan Mitchell will want to sign here when his contract's up. So whatever, who cares?
Yep.
So we have the coach hot seat rumors before the playoffs, no backup center or depth. Heading into those playoffs, do you remember we signed Greg Monroe? It's the Greg Monroe signing. Yep. We were picking between James Ennis and Jonathan Simmons, and like James Ennis ended up being one of our best players in that Raptors series.
I remember when they signed Monroe, I said to my brother, I said, this dude's old as shit. And I looked it up, I'm like, oh, he's much younger than me. Like a couple of years.
Yeah.
So
Steven Adams syndrome. Like except Steven Adams is still good. And
Evan Fournier is somehow still 27, I think. So it's like that.
Yeah, he's forever 21, Evan Fournier. But so they have the potential to play the Raptors in the playoffs. And there's also a potential, I believe they're 50-31 right now. If they win today, they'll be 51-31, which is the same exact record that they had that season. And then it's just like everything is rearing its head again. And kind of going back to the whole Thybulle thing, which is like, first off, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Like this is really like, I've always been more critical of Thybulle maybe than like your average Sixers fan or person who follows the team or whatever. But this is one of the things that like, you don't have the clout. You don't have the, like, I don't think anyone should be doing this. Like, I think everyone should get vaccinated if they can and blah, blah, blah. And I've already talked about that on the podcast. But I also think that like you are barely like the only reason that you're an NBA rotation player is because you have phenomenal defense. And like you're 25 years old. You have not made your standing as a legit like 10 to 15 year NBA player. This is going to affect your future outcomes on teams, contracts, everything. You are now putting yourself in a situation where you're going to piss off the coach. You're going to piss off your teammates. You're going to piss off everyone. And it is ultimately on Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers and everyone who knew that this was a possibility. And if he was lying about this to the team and they didn't have proof, that's where I'm lost. Because early in the season, we get the reports that he is vaccinated. Now he's not vaccinated. And did the team know that? Was the team lying? Because if the team was lying and they knew this, signing DeAndre Jordan makes even less sense.
I think the most likely thing is that they knew this. They either misguided or not thought they could convince him to do it.
Right.
And therefore didn't establish a backup wing option or didn't think it would be a problem, or by the time we get to the playoffs, there'd be no other issues with traveling or whatever. I will also say we did have the report, but the report was just from Keith, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Because there was a report that I had there was this whole, someone bet money in my fantasy basketball group chat over Ben Simmons' vaccination status. And there was money bet. And there was this whole argument back and forth about because the report came out that he was, but then there was a report that he wasn't. So all right, when did it happen? When was the bet made? Who should pay out the bet, etc. Because there was the Pompei report that said it said that Ben wasn't right, and then it said end of the bench guy, which could still be the case. But apologies to Charles Bassey, who I had decided it was him.
We all thought it was Bassey. If it wasn't, then honestly, my bad. I kind of implied that it was.
Not sure. We don't think he is. I don't know that he might have played in Toronto with the.
No, he didn't. It was Reed and Springer did. So he didn't play in that game, which was what made me raise the red flag. But I also didn't want to call him out by name in case it wasn't true.
Right.
And now it might not be true. I don't know. Maybe.
Look, I'm not going to. I won't call him out unless it's completely confirmed. It's whatever. But the report was end of bench guy who's not. They're not really worried about. He might not play much. So my brain went immediately like Springer or Bassey. Because Matisse is many things. He's certainly not an end of bench guy. No. So that report was probably just wrong from the beginning. Here's the thing. Whether it was, I'm not going to call out Keith either, but whether it was just wrong or whether he was lied to, that's a different story. Right. Because if Matisse lied to the team, that's to me, that's their problem. Yeah. If the team lied to a reporter, that's a bigger deal to me.
Agreed.
That's really shitty. I'm not going to say they did. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it with the size 85 font. That's a bigger concern of mine, but I'm also not concerned about any of this really, just that he's not vaccinated. What was I saying? Where did I go with this? Going back, if I can go back to the 18-19 parallels as well. I do think that it's a little bit different this year. Obviously, the whole team makeup outside of Embiid and Tobias is essentially different.
Oh, Tobias, right.
Yeah,
fuck, I forgot he was on that team.
I'm saying this now, maybe if I went back and visited myself at this time every year, I'd be wrong. But I think this is actually the most confident I've been in Tobias going into a playoff. Maybe, again, I'm probably a fool.
Maybe the first year he got here, I felt pretty good when he couldn't miss from three.
But I think that was also a part of the whole squad, the JJ and the Jimmy and the Tobias. But as Tobias as his own thing, I'm more confident this year. He's been really impressing me lately. And I want to feel more optimistic too, because for the longest time we were begging for a guard who can create his own shot. Is all we want. And we went out to get James Harden to do that. And yes, it might not be happening, but Tyrese Maxey doing what he's been doing this year and doing it with such confidence and such, energy. That's what, James Harden is the golden goose of this whole situation. Right. But the play style and what Maxey is doing is always what I pictured when I said I want a guard who can create his own shot. Right. Kind of like a wrecking ball. He's playing like a more athletic, not saying he's skill wise, but style wise, like a more athletic, younger Harden right now with the speed and just the reckless abandon going to the rim. And I'm so impressed by him. I just checked today. He's technically now third in 3-point percentage in the entire league. He was second yesterday for Desmond Bane passed him. I can't be more impressed by him. And that, honestly, I've been fooled by hinging my hopes on one person before, but Maxey has been impressing me so much today. if he is playing up to the level he's been playing all year, then he's the second hardest person to stop on this team behind Embiid, and he's very hard to stop.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think that ultimately what a big decision that Doc Rivers will have to make is he needs to be the closer, man. Like he
yeah, I
does.
agree.
Like I think that Harden and him can take turns down the stretch of a game. Like if Harden's feeling it, he's the step back three's fallen, he's able to actually get to the rim and finish through contact, all that
Yep.
stuff. That's a different element because Harden is going to get you a good shot. That's just
Yep.
kind of what his deal is. Like whether it's a wide open three for Danny Green in the corner or it's on the pick and roll with Joel Embiid or it's whatever it is. If it's zone shot that he's creating, Tyrese Maxey has proven down the stretches of big games, he's not afraid of the moment.
Yep.
There isn't a defender that can keep up with him in a straight line speed. That fadeaway shot that he hit on the spin around that he had against the Raptors the other night, single-handedly really kept them in that game down the stretch of that. And I don't know if you remember the first Raptors game of this series or this season, but he did the same exact thing. And he was going shot for shot with Fred VanVleet at the end of that game. And until Doc decided to run 3 post-ups for Tobias in the last 2 minutes of the game, we were on our way to win that game. And I think one of the things that has been good for Maxey's game is Harden simplifying the role for everyone. And Maxey's able to preserve a lot of his energy he's like the Energizer fucking bunny. And in the fourth quarter, especially like in that Raptors game, I think he got into foul trouble in the first half and they benched him, which made me nuts because I hate when coaches do that. But ultimately it paid off because he had so much energy in the second half when everyone looked dead. He was beating guys off the dribble. He looked incredible. And I think that Doc really needs to take the training wheels off with Maxey. I still feel like with Harden and Embiid, and this is something I talked with Harrison Sanford of Danny Green's podcast about this, and me and him were talking, and his thing was basically like, he wasn't saying that you should make Maxey like the 6th man and play him 20 minutes a game. He basically said running Maxey with the backup units and letting him be Maxey might be the best thing for his game in terms of when he's on the court with Joel and Harden, he's a little bit more of a corner 3-point guy, which he's very good at. And he's more of an attacker off of closeouts and blah, 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 but he can do both.
Yeah.
And if you let him cook on the second units, maybe by himself, and then you keep Harden and Embiid together through the majority of the game, the large majority of the game, that the Sixers are going to be, they once again just have to tread water when those two are off the court, and then they can run teams off the court in the other minutes. And I thought it was a fair point. And I think that ultimately what this playoffs will come down to is Harden and can Maxey continue to take these leaps in season that he has shown throughout the year.
I think it's also a challenge for us to think about because this team's never had an offensive creating threat in a long time, but the team also hasn't had a legitimate 6th man in forever, where the 6th man is an important role because he's not the 3rd best guard or the 2nd best forward or whatever. He's the guy who can run that second unit, whether it be as a guard or as a big or whatever, and play with mismatches and make you not just rest on your bench guys because he can just attack that. It's not necessarily that he's like not good enough to be in the starting lineup, which I think kind of breaks our brains a little bit too, because the guys who are the bench always just never been nowhere near good enough to be in the starting lineup. And
Tyler Hero's like the 3rd or 4th best player in the Heat right now.
Yeah. The ideal version of Shake Milton, which I think is probably what Doc saw when he came in, was that Shake Milton would kind of grow into that 6th man role. And he's kind of his play style is kind of that, right? Where he's kind of like, he's not much of a facilitator. He's kind of like a Lou Williams type where, and that's like kind of the ideal 6th man is like bucket getter. His decision making is not great, which doesn't help you, but that's the ideal. So I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think maybe it's probably too late to make that adjustment going to the playoffs. But I mean, I think we saw that I was calling for that at the beginning of this year, but then he's just played so well that like I just never want him off the court basically at this point. Right. And I think part of the energy he has too is that the only person who plays the way he plays, and he can only do it for so much because he shoulders so much of the load, is Joel. Because like you said, he's not afraid of the moment. It's because he's just having fun.
Yep.
It's not, and not to besmirch guys who this is their job. It's great for them. If you're great at it, it's your job. Go ahead. But like Maxey's having a fucking blast out there.
Yeah.
And that's why he's not afraid of that moment, because there's no moment for him. He's having a party.
Yeah, I
And
never watched Tobias Harris and think, man, that guy looks like he's having a lot of fun right now. Like, it's like there
no,
are
and
certain
you know
guys.
what? And that's not a cut at Tobias. Some people just don't.
No.
It's not just the way it's just not the way their brain operates. That's totally fine. My brain don't operate that way. But he's
Yeah,
just out there having a
exactly.
blast, which is why, I'm not afraid of him fucking up in a big moment because of the pressure. You could fuck up in other ways, but not because of the pressure, which is what you want in the playoffs. You want somebody who ignores the enormity of the moment and just plays the way they would play anyway. And I think that's why he'll be so great in these playoffs. That the leap he's made this year has just been astounding. I'm so impressed by it.
He really has been a true revelation. As like, it's very rare that you find a guy as malleable as him at his age.
Yeah.
Like, and part of this is his role that he played at Kentucky. Part of this is just kind of the mindset he has when it comes to like, he's just a winning player. And one of the comps that was made, and I think stylistically they're different, but I think one of the comps that Coach Thorpe that goes on Zach Lowe's podcast made when he was coming out of the draft was Kyle Lowry. And like a young Kyle Lowry, when Lowry relied a little bit more on his speed and his athleticism and all that stuff. And one of the things that Lowry and Maxey do that is very similar is that they are willing to do whatever the team needs them to do to win the game. And like Maxey can generate his own shot, can generate his own offense. He can hit threes. He can get to the rim. He can do all the things that you want your guard to do. But also when they ask him to play with Joel and James, he's like, yeah, I will attack closeouts. I'm going to shoot. I'm going to shoot every open three I get. Now that has been the biggest difference for me since Harden got here is Tobias and Maxey being like, oh, we can just shoot open corner threes and like our 3-point percentage is going to skyrocket. Our efficiency, the team offense is going to be better because of it. Yeah. And one of the things that Harden even mentioned in the one post game, he said, I thought our spacing wasn't great down the stretch. I thought all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And he's basically said like putting Danny Green into the starting lineup. And that's one thing that we can talk about. I think part of the reason why they moved Thybulle to the bench is because they don't know if they face Toronto in the first round, whether they're going to be able to have him for those games. And if they can't, then they're going to need to have another option. And putting Danny in there is something that I've talked about for a little bit, whereas it's definitely going to make the defense worse. Yeah. But realistically, who on Toronto is like, they don't have Kyrie Irving. Yep. They don't have Jason Tatum. Yep. They don't have like Pascal Siakam's a good player. Fred VanVleet's a good player. They got a lot of really good guys, but they don't have the one guy where you go, you need to have Thybulle on the court at all times. And Danny, along with Tobias and Maxey's development as catch and shoot guys next to James Harden, gives it an element of when you're running that pick and roll, it's pretty much you just have to live with leaving Tobias open. Yeah. Because you're not going to leave Danny open. You're not going to leave Maxey open because those two are going to hit 50% of their corner threes and you're fucked. Yeah. So it's really comes down to Tobias making his open shots and everyone else kind of hoping that the offense can be something that you can lean into the strength of going into the playoffs and just hope that the defense doesn't suffer too much because of that.
Yeah. I think, the goal is always for have Danny camp out in the corner anyway, but having him in that starting lineup almost, I'm not going to say forces him like he wouldn't do it anyway, but like it kind of forces him to stay there because there's no other spot for him on that perimeter really. Whereas if he's coming off the bench and he's with a bench unit, like he can kind of roam a little bit, which, not to say he's not great on the wing and stuff too, but you really want him just camping out in that corner and wait until his defender sneaks in a little bit and then hit him for that pass. That's really what you want him doing. So putting him in that roster is great. Like it stinks not having Thybulle at all, but yeah, maybe even if he was there, it'd be better to have him on the bench anyway. I think you're right there.
I wonder if this Thybulle, because we didn't get to see in the Toronto game because Thybulle wasn't able to play. Mm-hmm. I feel like a Paul Reed Thybulle defensive off the bench, kind of like a energy guys off the bench that will just cause havoc and create turnovers and get the team out running and doing all the things that we've kind of needed them to do, especially if Maxey's on the court with them, that it could create an element of, and this is something Kyle Neubeck talked about recently, which is Kyle talked about how when Embiid and Harden are on the court together, they're unstoppable because of all the things we've mentioned. When one of them is on the court and the other one isn't, one end of the court fucks up, basically. The offense is much worse when it's just Embiid plus guys. The defense is much worse when it's just Harden and guys. And Harden isn't able to carry the way that he used to be able to, even though Doc might seem like he thinks that he can. Mm-hmm. And because of that, having a different identity with bench units, with
Yep.
not all bench units, but keep in mind, not all bench units, Doc,
Yeah.
not eight, not 5 bench guys, but
Yep.
keeping Tobias and Maxey like in those games that they won against the Grizzlies and the games that they won against the Heat, like having a different identity for the bench, which is like maybe it's just guys that get out and run, because we don't have that with the starting lineup, because they're just a bunch of slow, unathletic guys. And like if you have Thybulle, Reed, and Maxey plus Tobias to be a little bit of like a half court hub along with Maxey, it might be workable is earlier in the playoffs at least, and it might be able to keep those minutes afloat and give yourself a change of pace that the team doesn't have right now. They're very rigid in their like identity.
Yeah, and like if you have a lineup like you said, and like you have Maxey as a willing 3-point shooter, you have Tobias as being hopefully willing 3-point shooter, and if the rest of it is just like energy, defensive, rotating, bothering people guys, that's totally fine. You don't have to have him that lineup play 25 minutes a game, but that's totally useful and fine. Like you said, it changes the identity of the team. You ramp up the pace of it. You have, you wear guys out who are being, when Embiid and Harden are on the floor, they're being like made patient to death and being back down in the post, and then all of a sudden just get running. Yeah, that completely works out. Will Doc do that? Probably not. But it would be interesting to see. And like, again, it's something we would like to see a couple weeks ago, maybe, to see how it looks before you get to the playoffs.
Yeah, before when we're going up against the Pistons or the Pacers or
saying all this stuff like, oh, this would be great if this happened in the playoffs. It's like giving me like, what if Ben just starts shooting threes in the playoffs, man? Like, we know it's not going to happen.
Did you see the film from practice? I saw it on his Instagram, and yes, he shoots with the wrong hand. Kevin O'Connor is right.
I'm so stoked to just not have to care about any of that anymore.
It's beautiful. I saw a clip going viral of him in the Nets practice shooting, and I was like, still looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
Still looks exactly the same.
There was 4 quick little stutter steps first. Oh,
cool. He traveled before?
I will say, watching the Pacers game yesterday, I kind of had my head down. I looked up, and I saw Korkmaz taking like this ill-advised, like 2-step back at like the foul line fadeaway thing. And I had a hard flashback. I'm like, oh, it looks like a fucking Ben Simmons jumper.
Dude, but, I might have talked about this on the podcast before, but when Korkmaz and Ben were on the team together, sometimes I would confuse them for each other, because I would just see in flashes, there's parts of Korkmaz's game that have a little bit of Ben to it. I mean, Ben's obviously much more athletic and big and skilled other than the shooting, but it's just funny that you had that moment of like, oh shit. But kind of just like heading into the playoffs, I do feel as though I think that there has been an overreaction by people, including myself. I'm very guilty with this. Because I just want to see them win one big game with Harden. That's been my whole thing, is like they were 0-4, 0-5 in the big games, maybe 0-6 even. Like they won all the games they were supposed to win except for the Detroit game. And then in the games that were like they're going to beat up on the lower teams, they're going to beat up on the middling teams, the Cavs, the Bulls, the teams that like they should beat. The Timberwolves. But when it comes to the Suns, the Bucks, even the Raptors, who have given them problems, they've lost to them twice since Harden got here. I just wanted to see them win one of those games. The Nuggets, like give me one of these games that you can win, because ultimately I do think that we overreact too much to like a loss. A game like the Nets game, that's a fine loss to overreact to. They got the shit kicked out of them. They were never in it from the jump. The team looked terrible. That's a totally fine loss to overreact to. The Suns game, the Bucks game, even the Raptors games, both Raptors games, even though they look like shit at times, they were in both of those games. And I think that heading into the playoffs, the only thing that I really wanted from this team was just one signature win that I could feel good about going into the playoffs, even though they were in all those games and they could have went either direction. And we're sitting here saying, this team's not a contender because they lost those games. But like, if Harden shot goes in against the Bucks, or if anything changes, if the Millsap run doesn't happen, there's a million different things that could have went differently in those games. And the Sixers win one or two of those games, and we feel a lot differently about them heading into the playoffs.
I think for me, to feel comfort like a sense of common comfort in the playoffs. I need, preferably they win game 1 against whoever they're playing. And I need at some point, whether it be game 1, game 2, game 3, whatever, I need them to do basically what they did in the Pacers game, right? Where they go up a bunch, they lose that lead, goes down to like 5 or 6, and then they take care of business. Because there are too many games where they go up a bunch, they lose that lead, and then they take care of business, and they lose the game. There's too much of that, especially in the playoffs and any Doc Rivers team. So like, I need to feel comfortable and not like oh shit, here we go again. I need them to have a win like that, where they go up a bunch, because they'll have wins where they go up a bunch and they just coast. That's great. But I need to see them lose that lead and then get it back and win the game before I can be like, okay, maybe this team's a bit for real. That'll be the
You
first
need
time
to see them
like,
face adversity, basically.
And honestly, adversity of their own making.
Yeah,
I want to see them fuck it up and then get over it and get back. That's what you need to see. I don't need to see them. I don't need to see them come back after like another team just starts hitting like 20 straight threes. Like that's, whatever. You can't stop that. I need them to mess up, shake it off, and then win the game. And then I'll feel really good about going forward in the playoffs. That's like my first, like, whether it be, a Harden game, like you said, like taking over, or bench guys, or Niang hitting a bunch of threes to bring them back, whatever. I don't care. I just need to see that team kind of come together and find their way, weasel their way into that win, and then I'll feel good.
That's
even if it's against a worse opponent.
Yeah, I mean, that's how the Bucks rewrote their narrative, really. The Bucks were a team last year that going into the playoffs, and myself included, no one took them seriously, and they were like, prove it to me when it matters.
Yep.
And the second they win that title, the second they win that Nets series, the second that they prove that they belong, the narrative completely shifts. And Giannis has this crazy game against the Sixers, and they barely beat the Sixers and the Nets and all that stuff. And it's all about their resiliency, and it's all about their being able to overcome adversity. But like the Sixers need a few games like that where like that's one of the things I have been a little bit worried about, is like, as great as Harden and Embiid are, I love Embiid to death.
Yeah.
Throughout his career and throughout the Sixers tenure, there have been games where he's struggling and he gets in his own head. There have been games where Harden struggles and he gets in his own head and he's yelling at refs. He's upset with teammates. And ultimately in the playoffs, your ability to persevere through those moments and be like, we're never out of a game, or we are going to take control of this game and we're going to pull away, is the difference between being what the Sixers have been and what the Sixers can be. And I still believe in the guys that I'm having on in a few days to talk about whoever the Sixers first round matchup is. Pound the Rock guys, their take on this was basically like, the Sixers could lose in the first round and the Sixers could win the title. Like, that's what I feel like. This team has a ton of variance, and that the bad moments might look bad. The bad moments might look really bad. But do you know how many fucking games I watched of the Bucks last year where Drew Holiday was 1 for 9 and Chris Middleton was 2 for 12, and they just kept shooting and they just kept going, and and by the end of that net series, they figured out their offense, and then they went into the next round, and then they figured it out from there. Like that is the kind of thing that needs to happen. And I've talked about Harden, I've talked about Maxey, I've talked about the bench, I've talked about the backup center ad nauseum. Ultimately, what this team, if they have a chance to win the title, Joel Embiid needs to be the player that he has been since he came back from COVID. And he needs to do it for an entire playoffs. And because he's the only guy that's good enough on this team to be the best player on a title team. And he's one of like 7 or 8 guys in the NBA right now that is good enough to be that guy. Yeah.
And I think like we had talked on and before we started about how we don't care for Coach Doc Rivers, but as much as we like would love a future with this team without Doc at the helm, I think even if you just get out of the second round and you get to the conference finals and you lose there, like you were saying about the Bucks winning, I think it was before we started recording, and how like it changes their narrative and like, everything's different for them now. I think even just getting out of the second round, getting over that hump, get into that conference finals, and not like just don't get swept in the conference finals, but even if you lose, right? That changes the story around Embiid. It changes the story around probably not Harden as much because he's got more baggage, but the team as a whole. And you go into next season with a lot more weight off of your shoulders. You feel better. You won't have the kind of hounding pressure you had all this season and all last season of you have to overcome that playoff loss. If you just get to that next step, you will cruise like emotionally and physically next year with a lot less pressure, which can only do good things for you. So if this year's not the year, whatever. But if you get past that, you start off with a head full of steam next year, where there's a lot less, national scrutiny on you, probably because you got over that hump. You had a big, nice story, whatever. And then you can kind of have a nicer, easier regular season and then gear up for the playoffs. So if it's not this year, you got to get to that point where you can lift that weight off your shoulders a little bit, get that albatross off you, and then just move on from there. I think that'll be huge for this team.
And the reason why I still think I prefer that Raptors Heat route is because if the Sixers lose in the first round, there will be changes.
Yeah.
If the Sixers lose in the first round, Doc Rivers, the only part that I talked about last week that worries me is does Embiid look around and go, James Harden is about to sign a Supermax contract. Tyrese Maxey is the only other guy that I feel like I can trust on this team.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this forever. I just signed a Supermax contract. What the fuck are we doing here? We can't even get out of the first round of the playoffs still. That's the only downside of losing in the first round that makes me think don't even risk it and just take the bold route. And he'd be right
to do so.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course he would be.
Yeah, no, and like I said, like if your goal, your goal is just to get to the finals the easiest way possible, right? And that's the path. But if on top of that your backup goal is just get out of that second round, that's the path to do so, right? Because like you said, if you're going to lose to either one of those first two teams, you're not a real competitor anyway. Barring some major injury and that's why you lose, you're not a real competitor anyway. So that's not really a concern.
But the Doc Rivers thing, if they lose first round or even second round and they look bad against Miami, he's gone. And him being gone plus knowing, we know what the Sixers need. They need a normal backup center. They need James Harden to have a full offseason of rehab. They need Tyrese Maxey to continue to get better. And they need plus athletes that can play on both sides of the court. And there's what's that?
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah. All these things that, as I've said before, the Sixers have done the hard part. They just need to figure out the rest. The thing is that a Raptor series, and everyone talks about the athletes in that Raptor series, right? Athletes, they're 6'8", they're long, they have long arms, and defensively, they're going to give you nightmares and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, all that's true, but so are the Celtics. And the Celtics are better. And they're basically a more optimized version of what you want from the Raptors. So we know that they're not going to, if the Celtics get healthy in the second round, we know they're not going to beat them if they can't beat the Raptors. Yeah. And in any of these series, their weaknesses will be exposed to the point where it's like, all right, Daryl Morey, you've had 2 years now. You're in your second year. You got James Harden. You got the star. You hit on Tyrese Maxey. You did a lot of good things. You hit on some of these margins. Drummond was a great signing. George Niang was a great signing, all things considered. You've done some good things. Now is time to stop being conservative about everything else, and it's time to start selling off draft picks, sending young players to other teams if you're not going to play them, and maybe you get a coach who does and develops them if that's the other option if you lose. But this ultimately, I'm going to feel like shit if they lose in the first or second round again. But the silver lining that comes from that is that we will have the blueprint to fix this team.
Yeah.
And if you can just keep Harden and Embiid's head on the same page and not kill each other, then they will be fine over the course of the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think that no matter what happens in these playoffs, that's the one thing that I'll take from it.
Yeah. I just want to touch back on, you said normal backup center, and I just had a flash. If at any point in these last 5 years, we could have been comfortable describing the Sixers as normal, it would have been so nice. It would have been the best thing in the world. A normal basketball team to root for. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
I just need normie.
Yeah. I will say though, too, just as a last note on the how deep they'll go into the playoffs, how you said if they lose in the first round again, you're gonna be, I think you said upset or furious, whatever.
Yeah.
I did this thing last year, and I'm actually, without even thinking about it, doing it again this year, where the day after they lost last year, I left for a vacation for a week.
Smart.
So, and it timed out where if they had made the NBA finals, or even if they made the Eastern Conference finals, I would have been home by game 4, right? And this year, based on the math, I believe I will be away for games 1 through 3 of the NBA finals.
Brilliant.
So nothing makes you get over a sports team's loss better than just going on a vacation right away. It's pretty great. That's probably why athletes don't mind losing. Like, I'm on vacation now. It's not bad.
You good, baby.
So, hey,
Bob
man.
did like this for like a month. He's like,
if you can, looking at next year, if you can pinpoint where the Eastern Conference Finals would end and when like game 4 of the NBA Finals would start, that's just go on vacation right in that sweet spot. Perfect. You're set.
That's actually brilliant. I might have to start if I didn't have to be married to this team because of the podcast now, I'd probably do that. And I might be able to get away with it. My girlfriend might kill me for bringing the laptop on vacation to record podcasts, but I will say that I think that that's a very smart move on your part, and I think that it's if you can take a vacation and get away from don't let this team control your life is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, I will say that last year, if they had made the Eastern Conference Finals, I would have been. It was just fine on vacation. I'm not like I'm in the middle of nowhere, but I would have been in Maine. So if I went to watch the game somewhere, I probably would have been around Celtics fans, which would be bad.
Yes.
But this year I'm going to be in North Carolina, so that shouldn't be too bad. I shouldn't be an issue. And there'll be plenty of places to watch a game if I want to go out and watch a game. Don't go to the deep woods. I'm not saying that. Go somewhere where you can go to a bar and watch a game. I mean, I'm not crazy.
Don't go Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, I mean, that's for the regular season. That's when you go Ted Kaczynski. But relax. That's all I'm saying. If you can time it out, if you can plan it, if you have the ability to go on a vacation, to take advantage of it. Go for it.
So, thinking about less negative things, more positive things, we're trying to cleanse the vibes here as we head into the playoff. Joel Embiid is going to win the scoring title. Pretty much guaranteed at this point. Giannis isn't playing today. LeBron's out for the rest of the season. Joel, even if he gets 0 points, will still be ahead of them.
And he'll still, I believe, even if he scores 0, he'll still average 30, which is
yes.
The first
that's what Bob
center
said.
Since 82, since Moses, I believe.
Since Moses, and the first center to win a scoring title since Shaq. So, some of the points per game stuff is like, Shaq played during the dead ball era and all that stuff. But ultimately, an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah.
And you were there throughout the whole process. You were, following the team, covering. Like, I think even the best outcomes, like even if he doesn't win an MVP, even if we never win a title or get to a finals, like I could have never imagined Embiid being healthy enough and good enough to not only win a scoring title, but play like almost 70 games. And if it weren't for COVID, probably like 75. Like, there's a lot of positives to take for not only the Sixers, but for Joel Embiid from this season.
Not to make it an MVP discussion, because I don't want to have that discussion. I'm already tired of it.
Same.
But I did see somebody say, and I don't know if they were a neutral fan, if they were, whatever. But I saw somebody say on Twitter, the worst place in existence, that Jokic's story is better than Embiid's. And I don't think there's a better story in professional sports than Joel Embiid's. Not even in the NBA.
Agreed.
This is a guy who I don't think people who weren't watching basketball in 2014, 2015, 2016 and weren't paying attention to this. And, if you were like a Nuggets fan or a Jazz fan or whatever, why would you be paying attention to the Sixers in 2015? I do not blame you. But how absolutely insane it is for a guy to come over, play half a season in college, break his back, get better, break his foot, fall to 3 because he would have been number 1. Even that is insane already. Miss 2 full years, have all the things happen to him that happened to him with his brother and everything, and then come back, and not only come back and like have his injury things, whatever, but out of the gate as a rookie, he looked insane. I don't know if it was the first game. I think it was the first home preseason game Embiid played. It was against the Wizards, and they went to like double overtime, and it was all bench dudes at the end. I think Scottie Wilbekin was playing in that game, but watching him in that, like, it was stunning. I think the first thing he did was he hit like a mid-range jumper, and I'm like, what the fuck is this guy doing? This is crazy. And even then, in my most delusional fan mind, I never thought he'd be at this level.
Same.
Never. And like, because it's the level he's currently at is insane to expect really of anybody, let alone a guy of his size, of his injury history, of just the way he plays, how he wears himself down constantly, how he's always throwing himself on the ground, how he's leaping after loose balls. It's insane to expect anybody to reach this level ever, let alone a guy who plays like that. So that's part of the reason why, too, like I want the MVP for him. I want him to have that. But I am just glad that he is what he is. It's truly stunning the way that what he does and how he does it. And it's so astronomically impressive that I think we should really all, like, even if he loses the MVP and we're all mad on his behalf or whatever, just take a second and just realize how absolutely insane this is. That
it's incredible.
A man of his weight, his size, his history, everything became the first center to average 30 points in more than my lifetime. First center to
40 years.
Yeah, first center to not my lifetime. Yeah, I'm not 40 yet. First center to win the scoring title in basically my basketball watching lifetime. Like, I watched that when I was a kid, but like I wasn't. What year did David Robinson win it? Was it 94?
94. Yeah, I think 94, 95.
I don't
5,
remember. 6 years old. I don't remember that.
Yeah, same.
So, like, basically the second ever in my lifetime. The other one is Shaq, who's the most dominant person to ever play the sport, essentially.
I remember Shaq was one of my first basketball memories of him just like destroying worlds.
Yeah. It seemed insane that anyone could ever do that. And now to have Embiid essentially doing that in a very different way. It's just, I cannot stress enough how insane and how, like, just it makes me so happy that he's here.
Yeah.
And anything that he wants to do in the future to make himself happy, if he wants to get the fuck out of here, I get it, man. Go nuts.
Yeah, I mean, that's
live your life, dude.
I can't be mad at Joel for whatever happens here just because of the years that he's given us in terms of everything that you just described.
Yeah.
The most points per minute in NBA history for any player still, over Michael Jordan, over Wilt Chamberlain, over the greatest scorers of all time.
Yep.
And it got to the point where the Ringer was like writing like an obituary for his career in like 2016, like right before he kind of got on the court and turned things around.
Mm-hmm.
All the Ben Simmons shit, all the coaching, the coaching change, the weirdness of the general manager fucking hating him.
He's been through like 9 careers of shit already.
It's
crazy. And like you said, like, the Ringer writing an obituary for his career after he got drafted after playing a half a year in college and then missed 2 full seasons. To us, we were like, oh, these assholes. But like, it's not an insane thing to do. No one would ever do that before. No one's ever done that.
No one ever thought he would be healthy. Even when he played in his 3rd season, he only played like 28 games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's another thing.
31, I think. Yeah.
It was like nothing. Like,
think about how crazy it is. He played 31 games that year, and he was so fucking. And granted, it was a weak year for Rookie of the Year.
It was.
But he was so fucking good that people really thought about giving him Rookie of the Year after playing 31 games. And then when he didn't, they almost gave it to Dario Saric.
Yeah, I honestly have thought about it, and I think that year might have changed the way that people think about Rookie of the Year. Because if you look at every Rookie of the Year since then, it's all been guys on winning teams. Not that Malcolm Brogdon wasn't like, I think the Bucks had like a decent record that year, but like, it's all been like your Luka Doncic's, your Ben Simmons, your Evan Mobley's probably going to win this year. Like, LaMelo Ball's team almost made the playoffs last year despite being really shitty. Like, it's all guys that you project forward and you say, this guy's going to be an all-star. This guy's going to be a Hall of Fame player. That was really the last year where, like, if that happened now, and I do wonder with the MVP thing, like, if people look back after the playoffs or in 5 years from now and they say, damn, Embiid really should have won that year. Not that Jokic isn't a deserving MVP if he wins, or Giannis or whoever wins. I think it will probably be Jokic. But, like, just from a historical context of, this is something Bill Simmons talked about. And Bill Simmons, who's been saying Jokic should be MVP for 2 months, has now changed his thing to be like, it's a lot closer than I realized. And that the way that, you know, everything was handled this season with Embiid, it's possible that we look back. I mean, hell, maybe we look back and we look at it the opposite and we say, Jokic was always the MVP and like they win the title next year or some shit or whatever happens. But ultimately, Embiid has now had 2 MVP level seasons. And in a season where Jokic doesn't have everything that happened with him, he probably wins one of the two. And I think it's ridiculous right now that people are holding the games counted against him, because Joel Embiid would have played like the same amount of games as Jokic if he didn't get fucking COVID.
Also,
Like,
it's funny, like you were saying, like it's weird that, like you said, that rookie of the year race kind of broke it and changed it. It's weird that hasn't changed. You'd think people would look back and go, you know what? Even with the games played, Embiid should have been rookie of the year. So maybe games played shouldn't be a barrier as much, but they've made it worse.
yes.
They were almost giving him with 31. Now they're like, well, he played 5 less games than the other guy. It's like, no one gives a shit. Also,
Yeah, it's like,
again,
if you think Jokic is MVP, that's fine, but the argument cannot be games played, and it cannot
also,
be advanced stats.
The argument, if you want to argue advanced stats, fine, whatever. Because people say this all the time, the true issue here is that there's no actual definition for most valuable player. What does it mean? It's up to the voter, whatever. If you want to use advanced stats, that's your prerogative. And if you want to use advanced stats and use all that, then Jokic is your MVP. Sure, go nuts. I don't care. He's incredible season. Great.
He's amazing. Yeah.
Most valuable player to me is a storyline award, right? It is not best statistical player. It is not, it's not even guy who is the best player on his best team. It's a storyline award. Who is the most impressive person, all things considered? Stats, everything. If you look back on, and I can't call out years and winners, but you look back on MVPs from years past, and it's like, okay, maybe the guy who was third actually had more win shares. Like, okay, but like there was no joy in watching that. There was no storyline. There was no push. How many guys have won MVP when they weren't technically the best player in the league because of their previous 3 seasons, or how they got over a hump, or they finally did this, they finally got that? It's a storyline award. And if you're looking at the storyline award, which again, you don't have to, if you want to look at it the other way, fine. If you look at the storyline award, there's no contest here. So that's all I'll say on the topic. I don't want to get in the whole MVP back and forth, but
yeah, I don't want to get into
it's just even without that, we just have to, as a whole, if you're going to vote Jokic and put Embiid down, that's silly. Other way around, not as silly, personally, I don't think. But
totally fine, in my opinion.
If you're going to vote Jokic or whatever, just sit back and look at what Embiid has done on his whole career up to now, and just give the guy his respect, really. Because it's truly, truly stunning. And as much as I think he's earned the right to have shaken the injury-prone tag, with anybody in the league, especially a person of that size, you don't know how much longer this is going to go.
Yeah.
So I don't want to happen to him is that he finally gets the true enormous recognition he should get a year too late.
Agreed.
So even if he doesn't win the MVP, I hope everybody just goes, but what this fucking guy is doing just deserves something.
Yeah, and keep in mind, amazing players who finish in the top 30, top 40 of all time don't win MVP sometimes.
Yep.
So it doesn't mean that to take anything away from Embiid's career and whatever. Kawhi Leonard's never won an MVP. Chris Paul's never won an MVP.
You can be the second best player for 10 straight years.
Exactly.
Pretty good, not an MVP. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, if Kevin Durant, realistically, if you look at advanced stats and you want to make that argument, like, LeBron was MVP for 12 straight seasons. But I mean,
not, because storylines change, right?
Exactly.
LeBron's levels here, so then to win the MVP again, he has to be up here. He can't just be here anymore,
right?
Even if he's the best player. It's the same in every sport,
Yeah.
If your level is here that you're used to playing at, you have to go here and then here and then here to keep winning it.
Agreed.
So,
and I do think that, like, I don't want to get into the advanced stat thing, because I've said on here before, I understand the value of what people see in advanced stats. I don't look at them anymore. I maybe used to when I didn't have as much time, or like before I had the podcast, when it's just like, okay, how's Karis LeVert playing this year, or whoever, whatever. I don't really look at them anymore. Ultimately, I think that a lot of people put too much into advanced stats because there's a lot of noise that comes with them. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of context that is important for a lot of these advanced stats. And I think that there's one that people have been using, which is just an insanely stupid one, it's called Raptor, which is 538s. And 538 is, Nate Silver thinks he knows fucking everything. And he comes out and he basically does this whole thing about how amazing Jokic is and why the stat loves him so much and does this whole breakdown and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I just want you to keep in mind that this stat has Jokic as a better defender when Jokic was a rookie in the NBA, as a better defender than the current version of Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah.
Who I think we would all agree is, like, if not the best defender in the NBA, one of the best 3 defenders in the NBA. Like,
without a doubt, easily, yeah.
like, clearly.
Yeah.
So
I think,
that's what stats, but I just want to say, just there's one element of this stat that really bugs me that someone tweeted at me, and shout out to I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry. I don't want to butcher it on the air, but I'll leave the link in the description down here. So in Raptor, it's a new statistical model, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Raptor takes qualities such as height, age, draft position, awards given by the association into account. You're
why
literally rewarding Jokic for being a second-round pick almost a decade later.
Yeah.
And that's why statistically he's twice as good as Giannis and Embiid and all these other guys who have a case for MVP.
Yeah.
Because he was drafted somewhere later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What?
The thing about, I think catch-all stats can be helpful as a starting point to try to understand how a person plays or what happens. As a one be-all, end-all, I don't think they're ever even meant to be that way, right? It's not like this guy has a better Raptor, so he's a better player. It's, you look at that and you go, oh, that's really high. I wonder why that is. Let me look deeper into this. It's part of the story. And if you want to use it as part of the story, great, but it's not, you can't just look at a list of advanced stats and go, oh, that's good. He's the best one in that, so he's the better player. Also, advanced stats that, first of all, a lot of these people don't bother looking into how they're created or the math behind it, which I don't either, because I don't fucking like math. Secondly,
like basketball.
advanced stats that were invented 2 years ago. Because also, remember when, so 538 invented Raptor, right?
Right.
Remember when they invented Draymond? What happened to Draymond as a metric? No one gave a shit? Okay, so we moved on. Okay. What's when you're a content website that has to churn out new shit all the time, you just invent new shit.
Wait,
they have a metric called LeBron. Who looks at LeBron? Nobody.
You mean the defensive metric? The defensive metric that said that Mike Dunleavy was a better defender than Tony Allen?
Was that Draymond or was that LeBron?
That was Draymond. Draymond said that Mike Dunleavy was a better once again, you don't even need advanced stats to make the case for Jokic. That should be the other part of this is regular stats say he's amazing. And watching the game, you can tell he's amazing. I just hate that now we determine MVP by just going to Raptor or EPM or LeBron or one of these metrics that fine. They're whatever. If you like that, you like that. But just going to them and sorting by them and saying this is the MVP, that is what has driven me nuts. And I started talking about this a year ago, not even with the Jokic stuff. It's just like if Jokic is the MVP, fine. If you want to make his case for all that stuff, fine. But you can't just use the advanced stats. And I don't think that a lot of people are, but I think that a lot of people are using it in a way to say he's so much better than Giannis and Embiid. And it's fucking ridiculous to me.
I will give you $25,000 right now if you can tell me what Draymond stands for. I pulled it up. It's fucking
defensive regression.
Nope, already wrong.
Oh, what's
it's more insane than I thought it would be. Defensive rating accounting for yielding minimal openness by nearest defender.
Enough.
The only people worse at doing acronym bullshit than 538 is the goddamn government. I'll tell you what.
This is the Matisse Thybulle hour. Where Matisse typhoid, as someone tweeted at me.
Oh boy.
So I just want to say, if Jokic is your MVP, that's fine. But I hope you go to hell. So last thing, or you're a Nuggets fan and you listen to this podcast. In that case,
I'll say cool. I hope you go to hell, but in your own time, no rush.
Eventually.
Yeah,
exactly. So last thing before we get out of here, this is something I didn't send to you, but I just want to say it goes back to this whole games played shit, which as we care less about the regular season and we care more about the playoffs.
Yeah.
When Giannis or Embiid or Jason Tatum's played a lot of games this year. When Luka Doncic or one of these guys wants to take longer to heal from an injury, they want to take their time and they want to make sure they're healthy for the playoffs and do whatever. That's fine with me. Who cares? The regular season's too long.
Yes.
It's stupid.
Yeah.
Colin Cowherd came up with maybe the dumbest thing that I've ever seen.
What? That's crazy. No way.
So I know a lot of these people, they just manufacture takes to get people mad and they do whatever. But I think that Cowherd at least puts a little bit more effort into it. Like he has like a team and like he comes up with monologues and it's not just like Jokic is
I'll say like
he's doing, other guy's better.
He's essentially doing like weirdo sports comedy in a weird way. So at least he's like a showman about it. People who just like come up with takes people mad, it's like, what's your life, man? What are you doing that for?
Yeah, like Jason McIntyre and Rick Bucher and like the guys who were just like clowns, basically. Whereas at least like Skip and Stephen A. and Cowherd, all those guys get into the character. They build, they do whatever. Like I appreciate the takesmen when they buy into their own bullshit.
Speaking of real quick aside, since you said McIntyre, way back when, this is probably 2015 or so. I was invited down when I was at the Crossing Bud. I was invited down to play in the media basketball game. I didn't know what it was. I wore sweatpants and New Balance. I was not aware what was happening. We got like last minute invite, whatever. And we played full court 5-on-5. And I can't remember the fifth person, but my team, it was me, Mike Missinelli, Jason McIntyre, Scott O'Neal. And I don't remember who the fifth person was.
Scott O'Neal, the Sixers CEO?
Yeah. Would it surprise you? Ball hog.
Not at all.
No.
Not surprised at all.
No.
A basketball.
Anyway, continue. I just had to get that out there. Yeah.
That is amazing. So, were any of them hoopers? Could anyone play that was out there?
I mean, Scott O'Neal can fucking play, actually.
Well, I mean,
it's type A, man. What do you expect? Other than that, I don't really remember. Who was on? Someone on the other team could actually shoot. God, who was it?
Media member or
media member? Yeah.
Okay.
I also remember.
Mithinelli, I would imagine, is not good.
No. I mean, I was no fucking better. I'll tell you that much. I fucking suck.
He's probably got 20 years on you.
This is true. Marshall Harris. Marshall Harris could actually shoot.
Oh, okay. He can hoop a little bit. Yeah.
I don't remember who else was on the team. I don't know if like Newbeck was there. I don't remember really who was.
Well, Kyle's
there.
Tall. It doesn't count. I don't know how tall you are, but Kyle, all the Sixers beat writers cheat because they're just tall. Yeah. So of course they can hoop.
But it was also we got introed by Matt Cord. I got introed after the legendary Yuki Washington.
Oh my God.
He just bounced. And we come out and we run on the court and Christian Crosby and there's the cheerleaders are in the stands. And I'm like, can they leave? Like, I don't want them watching this. It's not a good thing. First thing I did is I attempted a top of the key 3-pointer and I hit the shot clock. And I was like, this is
nice.
That's it. So.
Oh my God. You hit the shot clock? Are you?
What they don't tell you about playing on an NBA court, especially when it's empty, I wouldn't know when it was full. But since it has the see-through backboard and the seats behind it are so far away, it's a depth perception thing if you're not used to playing on courts like that. I'm used to playing on a court with just a flat white backboard. And also, I suck at basketball. So that's included. But I just like, my brain was just like, oh, that's much further than it is. And I just conked the shot clock with it. So
Russell Westbrook with the shot boy. Oh my God. That's unbelievable. I'm so glad you brought up that sidebar. Got some interesting information out of that piece right there.
No.
That's amazing. But back to Cowherd. Last thing when to get on here. Colin Cowherd did his all NBA teams based on guys who played 85% of their games this season to qualify.
Mm-hmm.
That's what his fix was for the season. Basically no one giving a shit down the stretch and taking off games and doing whatever.
Yeah.
Load management, blah, blah, blah.
Well, what is the percentage for league leaderboards? It's not 85. It's not that high, right?
For what?
For to make league leaderboards at the end of the year, you have to play what percentage of your team's games. I don't think it's 85. That's too high.
No, it's way too high.
70,
I know.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, guys
Yeah.
make it with 55 games a lot. I think you have to hit that 55 game threshold in order to, like, I remember Steph Curry played like 58 or something a few years ago and made one of the All NBA.
58 is exactly the line. 70% of his team's
Oh,
games.
okay, there you go. Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So, and I know because LeBron will not qualify for the scoring title now because
Yep.
he didn't play 58 games.
So then by Cowherd's ruling, then you can win the scoring title and not qualify for his awards.
Yes.
Cool.
Awesome.
Just check it.
So the first team was like normal. It was like Jokic, Tatum, like it was like the guys that probably will make first team, except for Embiid wasn't on there because he had fucking COVID during a pandemic, you know,
Yeah.
little thing. That his second team All NBA was what blew my mind. He had LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards, which fine. I mean, I don't think that they're good enough to make an All NBA team, but they're very good young players and probably will at some point in their careers. His center was Karl Anthony Towns. Fine. Okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. His forwards were Julius Randle, who has been not good at all this season, and Tobias Harris.
Well, you know, Tobias is a superstar. We've all been saying that the entire time, so I can't disagree with that.
Congratulate Tobias on making second team All NBA. NBA GMs, if you're watching this, second team All NBA.
Well, I mean, realistically, what would he be? Like sixth team, realistically? 28th team?
Yeah, I'm like, this year's Tobias, last year's Tobias, okay, sixth team, sure. Seventh team, whatever, fifth team, I don't know.
He'd be above Julius Randle, I'll tell you that much.
Well, last year, Julius Randle would have been above him. And this year, yes, Tobias probably above Julius. But I do think that, like, it just proves that none of these guys watch the NBA. No, like, come on. Like, other than the guy, like, Steve, I think Stephen A. watches the NBA. But, like, Colin Cowherd's watching Lakers games and national television games and the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, the majority of people that are paid to cover this stuff, unless you work for, like, The Ringer or, like, an actual basketball outlet, they're not watching the NBA. And that's why Zach Lowe has so much influence over all these opinions of NBA MVP and all NBA teams and defensive player, because people just don't have time or they don't really care. Like, I probably watch more NBA than Colin Cowherd, and that's insane. That guy's like a millionaire.
Which is, that's when advanced stats should be helpful to people who don't watch it that often, because it's kind of a jumping off point to look at. But people just look at it and go, okay, he better, he worse.
Yes. Exactly. So, Jim, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time. Next time we talk, the Sixers will be NBA champions. So
yeah. I can't wait to talk to you in 2029. It'd be great.
All right, peace, bud.
Later, buddy.